As the enormous bear began to furiously advance toward the villager, the man, overcome with fear, shouted a warning, begging the beast to stay back. He backed away, knowing any false move could be his last, while the predator's heavy paws pounded the ground ever louder. The young man, crouched behind the dense bushes, watched the scene with icy horror and confusion. He tried to figure out what exactly he should do, as he'd never experienced such a sight in his life. Until that day, he'd considered himself an ordinary city dweller, far removed from danger, but now a sincere desire to intervene and save the stranger awoke within him, despite the complete shock. He knew he wouldn't be able to escape. The armored bear, covered in thick, spiked armor, was completely focused on its prey and seemed unaware of the young man's presence just a few steps away. This only made him more uneasy. Any loud breathing could give him away. The young man felt panic rising in his chest, but he still came to the conclusion that he had no right to simply stand and watch. He pondered human nature, wondering if he was capable of overlooking the misfortune of others, and he understood that this choice would determine who he would become. Since childhood, he had held firefighters in genuine respect, seeing them as examples of true courage. Every time he observed them at work, he felt a sense of admiration, as if he were looking at living legends. These people, risking themselves, saved others every day, like heroes from legends, and the young man often dreamed of one day gaining the same strength, fortitude, and determination as they had. However, over time, he abandoned this dream, convincing himself that heroism was not for him. Sitting in his chair one day, he recalled his disillusionment with his abilities and decided to simply live humbly, without striving for greatness. But the sensation of complete weightlessness overturned his previous beliefs. As his body suddenly detached from reality, he lost the ability to think rationally, trying to understand what had happened and where he had been transported, as the space around him had been completely transformed. Recent memories flashed before his eyes: a late ride home on the last train, the fatigue from prolonged overtime, the drowsiness in a half-empty train car. And now he found himself in a completely dark place, where a bright screen emerged from the gloom, breaking the emptiness. The screen announced that the young man had been summoned to another world and offered him a choice of roles from several astonishing options. He was shown paths: to become a giant hero of destiny, to attain the power of a sage beyond reason, or to accept the fate of a demon lord, master of darkness and seeking to conquer the entire world. These images flickered before him, as if inviting him to make a fateful choice. As he contemplated the fates on offer, the hero couldn't shake the feeling that he was seeing it all in a strange, drawn-out dream. It seemed impossible to him that life could change so drastically in an instant. He immediately realized he couldn't become the chosen hero responsible for saving the world. He then tried to imagine himself as a sage, but he reasoned that his knowledge and experience were too limited for such a grand role, making this path also seem unattainable. When he considered the fate of the demon lord, he clearly realized that this path only leads to hostility, loneliness, and inevitable death, because such a being would have countless enemies. He didn't like the idea of such a future at all, so he wondered if it was possible to not make a choice at all and thus avoid the unwanted path. A hidden message appeared on the screen, confirming that a fourth option indeed existed: to choose nothing. The system announced that, since the young man had discovered this secret path, he was being granted unusual abilities as a reward for his unconventional solution. The screen seemed to endorse his intuition. The system signaled the beginning of a transfer to another world. Kusukako felt a soft force, like wind or light, and realized that his body was undergoing some kind of magical transference. Spirits and gods blessed him, but he only watched, amazed by the inexplicable changes around him. When his vision cleared, he found himself amidst a dense forest, filled with the fresh scent of herbs and the rustling of invisible creatures. Soft rays of light filtered through the foliage, creating a strange atmosphere. He stood motionless, trying to gather his thoughts and comprehend what had happened to him. Everything was too vivid, too intense, to be a figment of his imagination. The young man touched the nearest tree, feeling the roughness of the bark and the coolness of the surface, wanting to be completely sure it wasn't an illusion. His heart beat faster, and the sensations became increasingly distinct. Then he began to wonder if what was happening could actually be real. He wondered if he had truly entered another world, and tried to understand what role he would now have to play in this strange and unknown place. Scanning the space before him, the young man suddenly realized the disappearance of familiar things. He automatically checked his pockets, but his smartphone, wallet, handkerchief, and napkins were no longer there. Everything that made up his usual everyday kit had vanished without a trace, making him feel even more alien in this unfamiliar world. Now he was pondering what he should do deep in the forest alone. Just as this thought took shape, a transparent system window appeared right before him, as if responding to his inner request. The screen displayed his identity, age, new race, changed name. Below were his abilities, notable among which were transmission, full power, creation, agility, eyes of the craftsman god, dismantling, appraisal, and item box. Each ability seemed both unusual and intriguing. Looking at his own status, he noticed that many of his stats were related to mana. The numerical values indicated that for every 100 units of magical energy, his mana regeneration rate increased by 1%, which seemed incredibly beneficial. The young man looked at it all with growing interest, as the interface's structure was eerily reminiscent of elements from video games. This similarity made the scene not only understandable but also captivating. After examining his abilities, he began to ponder the nature of the full assist skill and decided to examine his other skills in more detail. At that moment, the system asked if he wished to activate full assist to accelerate skill adjustment. The young man understood that activation would give him greater freedom in using his skills, so he silently agreed, deciding to take advantage of the offer. At that very moment, he felt a warm wave pass through his body, like a stream of energy that enveloped him completely, as if reconfiguring his body from the inside. The system reported that the installation had been successful, adding a perfunctory message thanking him for his patience. The young man realized the change had occurred more quickly than he had expected. Trying to comprehend the new sensations, he peered ahead, feeling as if new information was pouring into his consciousness. He decided to test his item box skill and focused on the nearest target, extending his hand. A moment later, he mentally summoned the storage space, activating the ability as if opening an invisible area. And at that very moment, the tree he touched disappeared from reality, as if it had dissolved into thin air. The box of items revealed that the tree had been successfully transported inside the vault. Seeing this, the young man thought about how useful such an ability could be during a long journey or survival. His next glance fell on the ability to dismantle. He quickly realized he could dismantle monster bodies for resources and perhaps even use them as ingredients or materials. Then he realized he could probably dismantle wood in a similar manner. The system activated the creation process, and the young man marveled at how powerful and versatile his skill set had become. He felt as if he had gained access to something truly unique. He decided it was time to test the system's capabilities in practice. First, he decided to take the object out of the box and use it. It turned out to be an ordinary stick at first glance, but it looked stronger and better quality than usual. The young man noticed that the system was showing it as a cypress stick, and cypress is known for its strength and fire resistance. The item's effectiveness had been increased, making it far more useful than it appeared. At that moment, a faint signal sounded, and the young man noticed a new notification on the screen. The system informed him that his crafting skill had risen to rank 2 thanks to experience points earned for adding a new recipe. He realized that each new material or recipe earned him experience points for developing his skills. This meant he could progress gradually, gathering resources and expanding his skills, which seemed incredibly convenient and logical. Continuing to explore the interface, the young man wondered what other capabilities the system held. He tried interacting with the window, moving his gaze and focusing on the icons. Then he realized he could switch the display mode. The thought came suddenly, as if the system itself were nudging him to the next step, urging him to master the functions further. He gradually realized that everything that appeared before him was a reflection of his own thoughts and abilities, manifested by the system. This discovery made him realize how careful he had to be, as any thoughtless action could lead to unexpected consequences. Testing the limits of his abilities, the young man decided to mentally create an axe. Instantly, the object materialized right in his hands, as if it had grown out of thin air, confirming that his abilities were subject to his will without limit. A window then appeared in front of him with an assessment of the created item, detailing its parameters, quality, and effectiveness, which looked like a professional analysis of the weapon. The young man considered testing the axe, but this was his first time holding any weapon. This realization raised doubts, so he decided to use another ability to compensate for his lack of experience. He swung and threw the axe, simultaneously activating his agility, allowing his body to move more accurately and quickly than he had expected. To his own surprise, he saw the axe strike the nearest stone with great force, splitting it in two as if it were soft material rather than hard rock. Watching the stone disintegrate, the young man was genuinely amazed. He tried to comprehend how it was even possible to break stone with a wooden axe, and he realized it wasn't the material that mattered, but the strength of his skill. He realized that he had a vast number of skills to learn ahead of him. This sense of responsibility and curiosity pushed him to master each one. If his abilities allow him to do such things, he would like to learn as much about this world as possible and use every opportunity to develop. He was going to seriously work on raising the rank of his creation skill, developing his power as much as possible under the current conditions. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the young man realized his creation skill had already reached rank 5. This was made possible by his persistence and continuous experimentation. He identified 3 key principles for how the ability works. Experience points are awarded only for new recipes, a certain experience threshold increases rank, and recrafting old items doesn't provide any progress, no matter how many he produces. After creating 8 different objects, the young man noticed that each of them had its own effects or characteristics that distinguished them from each other. One of the experiments involved a cypress chair. Despite its harmless appearance, the system described the chair with effects that seemed unexpectedly dangerous, and a weakness of 5 points alerted the hero. He realized he needed to find a settlement before sunset to avoid spending the night in the open, where the danger was far greater. The young man continued through the forest. He knew he'd already covered a considerable distance, but felt virtually no fatigue. This was made possible by his rank 99 transmission ability, which heightened all his senses, accelerated his reactions, improved his physical performance, and even allowed him to understand unfamiliar languages. Thanks to this same ability, his hearing and vision became much sharper than usual. So, as he was moving along a forest path, he suddenly caught a strange sound that caught his attention and stopped, trying to get his bearings. Listening more closely, the young man realized it was a human scream. He immediately identified the source of the sound and rushed toward the source of danger. Running out of the bushes, he saw a huge bear attacking the man. However, this beast was no ordinary one. Its body was covered in armor plates, and its eyes glowed with malice. It was a demonic beast in bear form, created for battle and destruction. The young man instantly grasped the danger of what was happening. He knew that a fight with such an opponent would be mortally risky, especially without preparation. The man tried to defend himself, but the odds were clearly outmatched. The armored bear hadn't yet noticed the young man, giving him a chance to escape. If he'd wanted, he could have taken advantage of this and escaped unnoticed. However, he realized the choice was once again his. He clearly understood that he didn't want to die in this forest, especially in such a senseless way. His instinct for self-preservation told him to retreat, but an inner voice reminded him that running would leave another man to certain death. At that moment, he wondered if it would be right to turn away from danger. Once, as a child, he dreamed of becoming a firefighter, someone who faces danger rather than runs from it. He recalled moments when he admired the courage of firefighters, their willingness to help, keeping their cool in the most difficult situations. He wanted to be like them, to be someone who wouldn't flinch in the face of adversity. Now he stood here, wondering if cowardice was the very opposite of that dream. He tried to push away the fear, forcing himself to remember who he once wanted to be, and he knew that retreat would negate all his previous aspirations. He realized that if he ran away now, the man would surely die, and then he would be forced to live with that burden. Though he had long ago abandoned his dream of being a hero, he now had abilities he had to put to good use. So he decided to intervene. He knew he had no other option but to try to help a man in mortal danger. Using his agility, he darted forward and, with one swift movement, severed the armored bear's head, ending the fight faster than he could even comprehend his actions. He saved the stranger the moment he made his choice. The stranger, seeing such a scene, was deeply shaken. The young man reflected on how he had never aspired to be a hero in the literal sense, but rather to be someone who could lend a helping hand to those in need. So he stepped closer and extended his hand to the man, letting him know he was okay and safe. The stranger looked stunned but grateful, and the young man felt he had done what he had to. The man thanked him for saving him and introduced himself as Chrome. He mentioned that he was a merchant, hoping the young man would recognize this from his cart and clothing. The young man responded by giving his name, Ko, and decided to be honest, lest he appear strange or suspicious. Pointing to the bear's head and the axe he held, he tried to explain that he was a carpenter and simply knew how to work with wood. However, Chrome noticed with alarm that the young man didn't look like a carpenter at all. Ko realized his lie had failed and fell silent for a moment. Then Chrome, examining the axe, asked if the young man had truly crafted the weapon himself, as killing an armored bear with a wooden blade was nearly impossible. Ko responded with surprise and asked if the bear was truly such a dangerous opponent. He couldn't quite believe that the beast was such a unique monster. Chrome looked shocked and explained that the armored bear was an extremely rare and exceptionally powerful demon, capable of single-handedly destroying a small village if it got nearby. He explained that the monster's body is incredibly durable, and its natural armor makes it virtually invulnerable. Most attacks cause no harm to the creature. Then Ko realized that he had destroyed such a monster with an ordinary wooden axe, and he had to ask again whether he had really done something so remarkable. Chrome confirmed that it was incredible, adding that the sun would soon set and they needed a way to the city. He explained that he lived in a mansion and invited the young man to stay with him for the night. Ko noticed the man looking thoughtfully at his cart. The young man inquired if there were any important items in the wagon. Chrome admitted that the mercenaries and horses had fled during the attack, and now he was unable to carry the load himself. This made Ko consider whether he could help. He informed Chrome that he could move the items into his storage space. The merchant was surprised and asked if this would cause any complications. Ko, smiling slightly, assured him that everything would be fine. Using the item box, the young man moved the entire cart and its contents into storage. This action impressed Chrome even more than defeating the demon, and finally convinced him that the young man possessed truly unique abilities. Chrome, seeing the entire cart disappear into the vault, couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at the young man as if he were seeing not a human being, but a miracle that had appeared out of thin air. He then inquired where Ko had come from. The young man again tried to pass himself off as an ordinary carpenter, but Chrome's words made it clear he found such a story hard to believe. The man remarked that if such a man were an ordinary carpenter, then it would seem as if the whole world depended on carpenters. Ko tried to justify himself and said that he had lived in the mountains for a long time, where he trained on his own, but Chrome seemed to understand him completely differently than he expected. On the way to the city they discussed many things, and the young man collected a lot of useful information about the local customs and the world in which he found himself. He learned that skills were divided into two types, talents and intelligence. Talents were abilities like swordsmanship, while intelligence included skills like the item box. Each person was born with only 3 skills, and it was impossible to increase their number. Moreover, the inhabitants of this world did not know what levels were, and the increase in strength from killing monsters was an incomprehensible phenomenon for them. Ko increasingly realized how extraordinary his own abilities were. He wondered if he really possessed as much power as he appeared to, and how much it distinguished him from ordinary people. So he decided to ask Chrome another question about travel. Ko wondered why the merchant was traveling without proper security, given that this world was home to such dangerous creatures as armored bears. Chrome admitted that such attacks were extremely rare. He explained that he had hired adventurers, but when they saw the armored bear, they dropped everything in horror and ran away, without even trying to protect the client. Left alone in the face of the monster, Chrome realized the situation was truly dire. He explained that he usually hired experienced adventurers, but this time he'd encountered cowards. He intended to speak with the guild about it and pass the information on to the guild leader. Ko was amazed that the guild could assign escort missions to such irresponsible people. However, his thoughts were interrupted when Chrome announced that they had finally reached Anand City, which lay right before them. The young man felt a strong sense of excitement, seeing a city in another world for the first time. His curiosity grew. He wanted to know if elves, demi-humans, or other unusual races lived here. As they approached the gates, they noticed a crowd of townspeople gathered around a group of adventurers. The crowd loudly discussed the armored bear. People claimed they had fought a desperate battle and barely survived. Amid the screams, it was heard that Chrome had panicked and that the bear had supposedly killed him. The adventurers insisted they had done everything they could and nearly defeated the beast, but everything ended in tragedy. Hearing these ridiculous stories, Ko realized the adventurers were simply saving their reputations by covering up their shameful escape. The guard, listening to their excuses, suddenly noticed Chrome approaching and was shocked to find him alive. Chrome explained that he was alive thanks to Ko, who had saved his life. The young man stood nearby, perplexed by the current buzz around him. The guards moved closer to get a better look at their savior. To prove his point, Ko retrieved the severed head of an armored bear from storage. He claimed that, as a carpenter, he had managed to slay the beast with his axe, demonstrating the result. The guards recoiled in horror upon seeing the monster's head. No one doubted his words any longer. Then one of the guards, having recovered somewhat, turned to the adventurers, who claimed they had been in a brutal fight. He demanded to know how it happened that they declared Chrome dead when he was standing before them alive and unharmed. The adventurers realized their lie had been exposed. They began mumbling incoherent excuses, trying to get out of it. Chrome pointed at them and claimed they hadn't fought the bear at all, but had simply abandoned it and fled. The guard, closely observing the adventurers' reactions, immediately realized that Chrome's words were true. The situation seemed too sincere to be a fabrication. He declared that these men had indeed abandoned their escort to certain death, and that such a crime in this country could very well lead to imprisonment. He then emphasized that they would have to undergo formal interrogation, an unavoidable procedure. The adventurers were immediately bound and ordered to follow a guard. They were escorted to prevent any attempts at escape or resistance, as they were now considered suspects. But suddenly, one of the bound adventurers began to struggle violently. One of the guards, unprepared for such a violent attempt at resistance, attempted to restrain him, but the man broke free and glared at Kusaki Ko. He grabbed the guard's sword and cried out in despair that this was all because of the young man, placing all the blame for his own cowardice on him. Ko saw him about to attack him and thought how selfish and pathetic this man's behavior was. The culprit was trying to shift responsibility and take it out on someone who wasn't to blame. So Ko grabbed a nearby stool and engaged him in combat. The adventurer was furious that the young man had dared to fight back, but Ko was determined not to give in and to show that he would not allow himself to be treated this way. At one point, the young man delivered a direct blow with a stool to his opponent's head, putting into the blow not only strength, but also his newly acquired experience in manipulating objects. The adventurer collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Ko finally understood the meaning of the weakness 5 effect listed in the crafted item's description. Even a simple stool could become a deadly weapon in his hands. As he realized this, he noticed everyone's gazes focused on him. They were discussing how incredibly strong the young man was, and some even speculated that he was a B-rank adventurer or higher. Some recalled documents that listed his swordsmanship and claimed the young man had excellent combat instincts. Eventually, the people, overcome with delight, picked him up and began tossing him into the air, expressing gratitude and joy for saving Chrome. When the applause died down, Ko left with Chrome. He was interrogated all night, which was only logical, given that the young man had just been involved in a confrontation with an adventurer and had used force within the city limits. The interrogation was long and grueling, but Ko managed. From the guard's explanations, he realized that the guild had been experiencing numerous problems recently, even though the Adventurers Guild itself was considered a serious organization. The young man hoped the unrest would soon be resolved. Now Chrome had become his ally. He personally vouched for Ko and allowed him to live in the city without fear. The merchant was genuinely grateful for his rescue and insisted that Ko get a good rest today. They rode in a carriage to Chrome's mansion. The young man felt relieved, now that he had a place to stay in temporary safety. As he was thinking about this, Chrome announced that they had arrived. Ko looked out the window and was amazed. He knew Chrome was a wealthy man, but he hadn't expected to see such an impressive estate spread out before him. When the young man saw the luxurious estate, surrounded by a well-kept palace and a large staff, he realized that Chrome wasn't just rich, he was one of the most influential people. servants stood at the gate, and a beautiful fountain gurgled beside the path. Upon entering, he saw numerous servants greeting Chrome and the young man. Ko's reaction was so embarrassed that Chrome was surprised and asked why he was afraid to enter. The young man merely awkwardly asked if he truly had the right to cross the threshold of such a majestic house. Chrome assured him of this and invited him inside. The servants offered him dinner, and Ko found a lavish table with a variety of dishes, clearly prepared by the mansion's finest chefs. The taste and aroma of the food were incredible. The guest room he was assigned looked like a luxurious room in an expensive hotel, a soft bed, spacious furniture, exquisite decoration. The young man lay down on the nearby couch, feeling pleasantly tired after a hearty dinner. He realized he'd eaten far more than he was used to and quietly admitted that he had absolutely no desire to return to his former world. Ko reflected that even if he had managed to return to Japan, all that awaited him there would have been monotonous office work. No family, no love, no true meaning, nothing to keep him there. He realized that here, in this new world, he had his first chance to live the life he wanted. The young man reflected on how much better this new world was for him than the old one. Everything here seemed brighter, more alive, and more meaningful. For the first time, he felt needed, as if his existence finally had value. He knew traveling this world would be a wonderful idea. He wanted to see different lands, get to know the customs and cultures of the people, but first he needed to find a place where he could stay, even for just one day. The next morning, Chrome delighted him with unexpected generosity. The merchant allowed him to live on his land for a whole month, which left the young man genuinely amazed. Chrome explained that it was gratitude for saving his life, and these words touched the young man deeply. Chrome said life in the mountains was very hard and suggested the hero stay in the city and rest. Ko could barely hold back tears. For the first time in a long time he felt genuine concern. The merchant explained that the surrounding lands belonged to his company and guaranteed a decent living. The young man listened attentively, struck by such an attitude. Gradually, Ko realized that Chrome was more than just a merchant. He was the leader of a large and respected organization called the Scarlet Company, which wielded considerable influence in the region. Chrome presented himself as a simple salesman only to avoid embarrassing his interlocutors and creating awkwardness, as power and wealth often complicate communication. Furthermore, it seemed he was preparing to take over the company for his own son. The merchant admitted that he considered his meeting with the young man a gift from fate, as if the gods had brought them together. He said he was planning to retire soon and wanted to thank Ko for saving him. The young man sheepishly insisted that it was all due to his skills, not his personality. Chrome, noticing his confusion, decided to give the young man the advice of someone with experience. He explained the difference between the ability to create something with one's hand and the ability to embody it in perfect form, two opposing, yet important, qualities. He said that many people use their abilities for evil purposes, but Ko made the best choice. The merchant emphasized that the young man had much to be proud of, as he used his powers to save others. These words deeply touched the hero. He promised to remember them and thanked Chrome. The merchant suggested the young man join the guild if he wanted to see the world, as with his skills he could easily achieve a high rank and travel freely. Ko agreed, finding the idea sound promising. Chrome explained that appearance and impressions are important in the guild. Newcomers are often underestimated. Therefore, he advised showing up in armor to avoid being perceived as weak. He also recommended acting confidently and avoiding excessive politeness. The young man listened to the instructions and promised to follow them. Chrome said he would leave him alone with his thoughts so he could collect himself and prepare. Alone, Ko thought about the armor Chrome had mentioned. He tried to figure out where to get suitable equipment, but after a moment, it dawned on him that he had everything he needed to create his own. He decided to use his skills and the materials he'd acquired earlier. As the young man concentrated and began crafting the armor, the system asked if he wished to wear it. He affirmed without hesitation, confident he would feel protected in it. He found himself wearing armor made from armored bear. He felt the weight and strength of the material, which was as strong as steel. Clad in such armor, he felt truly prepared for his adventurer's debut. The armor looked terrifying and commanded respect. It retained the natural strength of the beast from which it was crafted and gave the hero a menacing appearance. So he decided the time had come to appear before the guild for the first time. When he entered the guild building, all eyes instantly turned to him. People stopped talking and turned to examine the armor he was wearing. Many immediately realized it was armor made from an armored bear. Whispers immediately broke out in the guild. Everyone assumed that the man standing before them was the very same young man who had defeated the adventurer at the city gates. Within the guild, legends had already begun to be told about him, calling him a bear slayer and a hero capable of dealing with demons single-handedly. People wondered why he was there. Some assumed he was looking for someone, others that he had come to make a claim. Some even expected a fight to break out at any moment. Some discussed his rank, trying to guess his strength. The young man himself, listening to these conversations, felt a slight sense of pride, but he knew he was only a budding adventurer, so he tried to ignore the whispers. When the young man approached the reception desk, where he usually interacted with the guild administrators, one of the employees became visibly nervous. He tried to plead ill health, perhaps Ko's armor was too intimidating. At that moment, a girl approached the counter and gave the young man a warm, friendly smile. Her demeanor contrasted sharply with the previous receptionist's reaction. She welcomed him to the On an Adventure Guild. The young man learned that the secretary standing before him was Milia, kind, polite, and, by all appearances, very responsible. She admired his armor and asked how she could help. Remembering Chrome's advice about not being too polite, the young man tried to speak evenly and confidently. He said he wanted to register as an adventurer and inquired about the possibility. Hearing the hero's desire to apply, the girl raised her eyebrows in surprise. His appearance was completely at odds with the image of a newcomer, which confused her a little. She tried to explain her reaction. The young man was so well equipped that she assumed he was a seasoned adventurer from another country. Ko merely smiled slightly and said he was a rookie. Milia also apologized for the misunderstanding, admitting she had been inattentive. She handed him the guild registration form and explained that after filling it out, he would need to pass a practical exam. The girl carefully placed the form on the table, pointing out each section. As he filled out the form, the young man noted that it was remarkably similar to those he'd seen in Japan. When he handed it over, Milia studied it carefully. She was surprised that Ko had written that he wasn't strong in combat. She even wondered if it was a joke, considering his armor. However, Ko explained that this wasn't a joke, he genuinely wanted to avoid unnecessary battles. Milia briefly thought he wasn't serious, but then she accepted the papers and informed him that he now needed to take a practical test. She asked if he was ready to do it right away. The young man was at a loss, he didn't know what awaited him. Then Milia explained that the test consisted of sparring with an instructor. Moreover, the exam was being administered by a former A-rank adventurer, a man who constantly boasted that he was stronger than an armored bear. This meant the test would be serious. They descended into the underground training area, and a crowd of adventurers followed them. Everyone wanted to see the newcomer fight the renowned instructor, and anticipation was in the air. Ko wondered why people were so interested. He'd come simply to be tested, but it seemed like everyone else was treating it like a performance. The adventurers discussed the upcoming fight, recalling the instructor's words about him being stronger than the armored bear. Some even offered bets, which caused a stir and excitement. The young man heard every word. He understood that for them it was entertainment, but for him it was a test of his own capabilities. He felt that this fight needed to be taken seriously. Milia noticed his frown and asked if he was afraid or nervous. She tried to reassure him, reminding him that he could pass the exam without winning. Besides, in her opinion, he had nothing to lose. And some of the adventurers, judging by their conversations, were confident the young man would win thanks to his strength. Ko understood that he couldn't forget about defense. He decided that now he could only move forward. He didn't want to lose face in front of himself and the people who believed in him. He pulled out his cypress hammer. It weighed over 100 kilograms, but thanks to its Force 5 effect, the young man felt it almost like a light weapon. This gave him additional confidence. When he took his first practice swing, the entire training ground fell silent. The hammer sliced through the air with such force, as if it were the weapon of giants. The people around him looked at him in shock. Milia admitted she hadn't expected to see someone handle such a heavy weapon so easily. To everyone, he looked exactly like everyone had already whispered, a bear killer. Some even nervously muttered that the instructor might get hurt today. The atmosphere changed abruptly, a tense, almost deathly silence descended. An instructor entered the arena, a tall, strong man with a confident gait. He asked if the young man was the rumored armored bear slayer. He then noted that Ko had demonstrated extraordinary strength for his age, but wanted to remind him that there was always someone stronger in the world. The instructor placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and assumed a fighting stance, challenging the young man to a duel. Ko realized that the man standing before him was a truly experienced former A-rank adventurer. His movements betrayed the familiarity of real combat. However, the hero was determined, he had no intention of losing. One of the observers announced that if both sides were ready, the duel could begin. The young man pondered for a moment how exactly he should begin. Then the instructor explained that this was a test, and the candidate could go first and attack directly. Everything was as fair and simple as possible. Ko lunged forward, showing he accepted the challenge without the slightest hesitation. The determination in his gaze indicated he was ready to give it his all. He tried to attack with several movements at once, using a heavy hammer and objects that he managed to get from the storage, striking where the instructor had stood a second ago. The young man noticed that the instructor masterfully read his every move. He dodged heavy blows with minimal effort, as if dancing on the edge. At this pace, the hero was unlikely to touch him unless he adopted a different approach. Ko went on the attack again. The instructor noted that his blows were powerful, but still vulnerable. The heavy hammer limited his maneuverability. But suddenly, the instructor saw that the young man was using something other than brute force. The young man activated his item box, an ability no one in the room expected to see used so effectively. He dropped the hammer at one point, then instantly retracted it at another, creating a perfect feint. This caught the instructor off guard because it disrupted his reading of the movements. Using this trick, Ko waited for the right moment and delivered a blow that split his master's sword in half. A murmur of surprise echoed throughout the training area. No one believed such a thing was possible. Milia, watching nearby, raised the hero's hand and declared him the winner. Her voice was firm, confirming the official result of the exam. The adventurers standing around the arena were stunned. They hadn't expected to witness such an unusual fight and now looked at the young man with genuine respect, admiring his skill. The instructor approached Ko and conceded defeat, noting that the young man had fought admirably. The hero asked if the fight had offended him. He replied that he hadn't felt the slightest negative reaction. On the contrary, he was impressed. He explained that he'd never seen the box of items used in such a way before. The world was full of unexpected talents, and the young man had demonstrated one of them. The instructor extended his hand, wanting to shake Ko's hand in recognition. Shaking his hand, he officially confirmed the young man's successful completion of the exam. He added that he had high hopes for his continued growth, and Ko merely smiled slightly in response, hiding his embarrassment. After formal confirmation, he was given a guild card, a symbol of his becoming a full-fledged adventurer. The hero was incredibly happy and soon struck up a conversation with Milia. She admitted she hadn't expected the rookie to defeat an A-rank instructor. In her opinion, the young man was much stronger than he looked. Ko felt satisfied, but he understood that the victory was made possible by skill and perseverance. Then Milia handed him a document with the guild's rules and offered to explain them in person. She assured him that a verbal explanation would be easier and quicker than reading a long text. The hero realized that he really should listen to her explanation. She explained that adventurer levels are divided into 7 ranks, and Ko is currently at rank F. The guild increases ranks based on quest completion and the quality of their performance. An adventurer's progress is recorded in their quest history. Milia then warned of severe penalties for misconduct, false reports, betraying a client, forging a guild card. Ko assured her he would never break these rules. She said he would receive a fair reward for every completed task. That was the guild system. The young man noted that the guild system was remarkably reminiscent of the game mechanics from his previous world. He felt a familiar structure, complete with ranks, quests, rewards, penalties, and character progression, as if he were truly part of a living RPG universe. Milia explained that reaching rank B was one of the main goals, as at that level, adventurers received insurance payments for injuries and even a potential pension upon retirement. She doubted the latter, but insisted that the young man should strive for advancement. Ko patted his chest, musing that reaching rank B would only enhance his future and bring no downsides. He decided to focus on advancing through the ranks for the time being. Afterwards, Milia pointed to the task board and offered Ko one of the quests. She recommended a simple but useful one for a newbie: collect 50 Neos healing herbs. The client was a healer who frequently made such requests, as these plants grew in dangerous places inhabited by infected monsters. Each herb was paid 400 coms, a very generous price. Ko estimated that 50 herbs would net him 20,000 coms, a truly impressive sum for a newbie. He carefully studied the quest description and decided the task was crystal clear and worth the effort. However, Milia cautioned him, the demand for healing products was high, but so were the risks. She asked Ko to listen carefully to the most important rule before deciding to undertake the mission. She explained that newcomers highly recommended being accompanied by a more experienced adventurer, preferably one of high rank. This would increase the chances of successful completion of the mission and reduce the risks. If Ko was willing, she could arrange for someone suitable for free. The young man was surprised that Milia was so willing to help. She gave him a thumbs up and confidently explained that her negotiation skills were 100% success rate. This inspired the hero, and he decided to confide in her while she headed to her colleagues for support. Ko breathed a sigh of relief. He was glad he'd been able to become an adventurer without any major obstacles, and he decided he'd be sure to thank Chrome when he saw him again. He remembered how generously Chrome had supported him, helped him join the guild, and even given him 80,000 coms. It was more than the young man had ever received in his previous life. He thought that if the opportunity presented itself, he would buy only from Chrome and support his company. At that moment, the door opened, and a girl entered, attracting attention with her impressive appearance. Ko was stunned by her appearance. She had long red hair that seemed to shimmer with the hues of the sunset, bright crimson eyes that resembled the sparkle of precious stones, and a pair of dragon horns, a sight he had never seen before. Milia introduced the girl as a high-ranking adventurer, a half-dragon named Irisnit Fafnir. Her presence instantly filled the room with a sense of power and confidence. Iris glanced at Ko and said she'd heard of him as a bear killer and was glad to meet him. Then her expression suddenly relaxed, and she asked to be called simply Iris, which made the atmosphere less formal. Ko bowed and introduced himself by his full name, Kosaka Ko. He was flattered by the attention and hoped to get some advice on his first mission. Iris readily accepted him into the team. However, she was surprised by his Japanese bow, a gesture no one in this world used. Ko realized he did it out of habit, a holdover from his previous life, and straightened up awkwardly. He heard a light laugh and looked up. Iris was amused, and her laughter sounded completely unthreatening. She told him he could treat her as an equal, since they were both adventurers. The young man became even more embarrassed, but promised to try to act natural. Milia explained to Iris that Ko was talented, but had lived in the mountains for a long time and knew little about the rules and traditions of this world. Furthermore, Iris had had difficulties with some people, so she decided Ko might be a good partner for her. Iris sighed, realizing why she had been chosen, and accepted the offer without protest. When they stepped outside, Iris asked the young man how he wanted to begin the quest. Ko responded immediately he needed to gather information first, so as not to wander blindly. He remembered how, in games, he always studied websites, materials, and item descriptions first. So he explained to Iris that he knew nothing about Neos grass, neither its appearance, nor its habitat, nor the dangers associated with harvesting it. Ko remarked that he would like a map of the surrounding area to better understand the terrain and the location of danger zones. He also wanted to know what kind of monsters lived nearby. Hearing this, Iris nodded approvingly, believing the young man to be thinking quite sensibly and strategically. She said that with the right preparation, he could achieve impressive results. Winking at him, she added that such reasoning was rare for a rookie and that he truly lived up to his status as a rising star. The young man, slightly embarrassed, noted to himself that the girl was greatly exaggerating his abilities. Iris mentioned that almost all the necessary information was already contained in the booklet Milia had given him earlier. Taking the hint, Ko finally decided to carefully examine its contents. Opening the booklet, he saw that the first part was devoted to the structure of the guild, but the second part contained the information that he especially needed now, a description of local materials, plants, monsters, and natural features of the surrounding area. The young man studied the information in amazement, admiring the quality of the layout. He even remarked that the booklet reminded him of game manuals and detailed guides. Then Iris revealed that the author was Milia herself, who had previously worked at the royal capital headquarters and had been sent to Anand to restore the local branch's effectiveness. According to Iris, Milia was tasked with improving the guild's entire administrative system, and she was doing a superb job. She added that Milia might be transferred back to the guild headquarters in the future to a leadership position, and Ko seemed to have become her favorite, but he had no reason to worry about such a status. Ko considered this. He understood that many considered him talented, but being favored was something entirely new to him. While he was pondering this, Iris asked if there was anything else he wanted to know before starting the quest. The young man replied that he wanted to know about places that sold useful items for adventurers, other than weapons and armor, so that he could be better prepared. Iris immediately informed him that such goods were sold on Adventure Street, the main shopping thoroughfare for all adventurers. They headed there together. There, Ko saw a variety of items, sturdy ropes, torches, water containers, useful stones, and a host of other small items. He decided to put it all in his box of items. Iris watched him stack the items and asked if he had enough space, as she thought regular boxes held very little. Ko confidently said there was no need to worry, as his box of items was endless. Hearing this, Iris froze for a moment. It sounded incredible, even to her. Gradually, he realized that ordinary item boxes were limited and rarely used because there were special magical bags and other artifacts that served as storage much better. To demonstrate, Iris pulled out her spear and showed the bag she kept it in. The spear was longer than she was, yet somehow it fit inside the small bag, which astonished the hero. She explained that all high-ranking adventurers carried such artifacts, and so her surprise was genuine. Ko's box was almost absurd in its capabilities. At that moment, the young man realized he had other abilities, perhaps even more cheating. When he felt his equipment and preparations were complete, he decided it was time to begin the quest. So they set off for the Kello forest, where the necessary herb grew. Passing through the dense trees, the heroes began searching for the Naos plant. The young man already knew its approximate description, so he carefully examined every patch of ground. After a while, he spotted exactly what they were looking for and asked how to properly extract the plant. Iris explained that extreme caution was needed. Don't pull too hard, as this could damage the stem or leaves. But preserving the roots was especially important, as they possessed medicinal properties and were highly valuable. Ko crouched down next to the plant and was initially going to carefully dig up the ground, but then it dawned on him that he could use his skill much more conveniently and quickly. Iris watched in surprise as the young man stared at the plant, even asking if anything strange had happened. At that moment, Ko activated an ability he had successfully used before. A moment later, the grass was in his hands, whole, roots and soil intact, as if it had been carefully extracted whole. Iris was so stunned that she froze in place, trying to comprehend what exactly he had just done. Seeing the herb appear right in the boy's hand, Iris asked in surprise what exactly he had done. Ko calmly explained that he had simply used his item box. He had placed the herb inside and immediately retrieved it, leaving behind a perfectly preserved plant. He remarked that this method would make harvesting herbs much easier. Iris was amazed, having never seen anyone use such a skill in such an inventive way. She admired Ko's ability to think outside the box. Then, as they continued searching, the young man spotted another bush and informed the girl that he had found the plant he was looking for. However, upon closer inspection, he was confused by the fact that there were suspicious spots on the leaves that he had not seen before. Iris immediately noticed the differences and explained that it was indeed a medicinal plant, but not Naos. The red spots indicated that this was a different species, with completely different properties. She explained that this was a common mistake. Many beginners confuse Naos grass with a dangerous variety called Neolana, the one they had just observed. The two plants grew in similar conditions, making it a risky proposition. Iris warned that because of this peculiarity, the quest is considered difficult and often takes almost a full day. She said they would have to be patient and spend as much time in the forest as necessary. Hearing this, Ko sighed at first, but then remembered the skill he'd been saving for emergencies. He finally decided to use the eyes of the craftsman's god, an ability that allows him to identify needed objects in the surrounding space. This was the best way to speed up the task. Activating the skill, the young man felt his field of vision transform. The eyes of the god of crafts could find any material, plant, or object he sought. This transformed the complex quest into the simplest task. In just an hour, Ko successfully collected all 50 required herbs. For a typical novice, this would have taken half a day or more, but his abilities allowed him to complete the task several times faster. Returning to the city, Iris admitted she hadn't even expected the quest to be completed so quickly. Ko was embarrassed and said it was all thanks to his skills. Iris remarked that Milia would probably be delighted to learn the task was completed so early. After finishing their conversation, she asked Ko if he had any questions left. He paused and decided he wanted to ask her a personal question that had long been on his mind. He inquired about half-dragons, as this was the first time he had encountered a member of such a race. Iris explained that dragons were the greatest creatures of antiquity, ruling the world. Half-dragons, on the other hand, were their descendants, inheriting a portion of their power. She said their lifespans were much longer than human lifespans, and their bodies were considerably stronger and more resilient. Upon hearing this, Ko admitted he envied them. He considered such a natural environment a true blessing. Iris looked at him in surprise, as if hearing such words for the first time. She hastened to assure him that everything was fine, but Ko realized the girl seemed surprised by his reaction. She added sadly that humans generally shunned her race, considering them monsters, and this hurt her more than she let on. Ko apologized for his awkwardness, but the girl asked him not to worry about it and not to blame himself. She then turned away and moved away a little to hide her emotions. A moment later she admitted that the young man's words about envy were extremely unexpected for her. But they were the ones that made her happy. She smiled for the first time in forever, and Ko realized that that smile meant a lot to her, perhaps more than he could have imagined. Returning to the city, they headed to the Adventurers Guild. When Milia saw them return, she couldn't believe the quest had been completed so quickly. The young man showed her 50 herbs he'd collected. Milia examined them in amazement, noting that the plants were fresh, the roots intact, the leaves undamaged, a rarity even for seasoned adventurers. She left to confirm the reward and returned a few minutes later, saying everything had been verified. She was genuinely impressed by the high quality of the collection and asked Ko how he had managed to achieve such a result. After all, this quest is usually one of the most difficult and time-consuming. Ko explained to Milia in detail how he used his item box and why the herbs arrived in perfect condition. She closed her eyes, as if trying to visualize the entire process, and the young man realized she would be compiling a report on the quest's completion. He suspected that this method of collection might raise many questions from the guild leadership. Milia announced that for now they would only be given a fixed reward of 20,000 calms. However, if the herb gathering method the young man used was deemed acceptable, the guild could offer an additional reward. Iris admiringly said that this was exactly the result she expected from a rising star. The young man tried to assure her it was a fluke, as he wasn't used to being so enthusiastically praised. But the girl insisted it wasn't luck at all, and the young man thanked her for her kind words. Thus, he completed his first official quest. Later, Ko headed to his temporary quarters, which Chrome had provided him with. Before him once again loomed the enormous mansion, which looked more like the residence of a noble lord than an adventurer's home. The young man wondered if this was the right place for him to live. He decided that it would be inappropriate to appear in front of the house in bare armor, so he ran into a nearby alley, quickly changed into a regular suit, and only then entered the mansion, feeling more presentable. Returning to his assigned bedroom, he looked around and was surprised once again. The room was so spacious and luxurious that, compared to his old apartment in Japan, it felt like a VIP suite. After looking at the menu, he considered ordering dinner, but the prices seemed too high even by the standards of the New World. So he decided to check out the gourmet guide, hoping to find information on good restaurants nearby. The book recommended the Golden Bear restaurant, known for its signature fried chicken, which was considered a local culinary hit. Ko decided it was worth trying this dish for 7,500 kos and headed there. The dinner was delicious, and afterward, he was offered wine, which he politely declined, feeling a little awkward. Returning home, he stepped out onto the balcony and, looking out over the city at night, felt an almost childish delight. He rejoiced at how rapidly his life was changing and promised himself that tomorrow he would do everything he could to continue growing. The next day, the young man set out for the Phaedos Mountains, taking on a quest to eliminate lone wolves, creatures that, as their name suggests, hunted alone and posed a moderate threat. The base reward for completing the mission was 20,000 koms, with an additional 5,000 for each wolf. Ko estimated that this was a profitable and entirely feasible undertaking. However, during the first hour, he didn't encounter a single wolf. Instead, he discovered 3 types of materials: the naos grass he'd collected yesterday, the lilium plant, which, when mixed, can produce detoxifying effects, and a moist mushroom containing a small amount of magical energy. Using his crafting skills, the young man realized he could create health-restoring and detoxifying potions from these ingredients. He only needed containers, so he decided to use the water bags he'd purchased earlier. Mixing the ingredients, he created a restoration potion. Its effects included full restoration of strength, a powerful surge of energy, and enhanced regeneration, boosted by a +5 stat. The young man decided to taste it. The drink resembled the mint sleep tablets he bought in Japan and provided a refreshing sensation. Encouraged by the result, he set about creating his next potion. This time, he created a detoxifying potion. It instantly neutralized any poison and had a pleasant aroma. Its effects included enhanced detoxification +5 and accelerated cleansing of the body. Ko thought it actually tasted like mouthwash. After tasting it, he found the drink surprisingly pleasant, like sweet grape juice. While he was enjoying his new creations, a strange sound caught his attention. Turning around, he spotted a lone wolf, growling menacingly, its sharp fangs bared. This was precisely the enemy he needed for the quest, so the young man immediately grabbed his sword, preparing for combat. When Ko saw the wolf in full attack stance, he felt a slight rush of adrenaline. Now he had to test how effectively he could apply his skills in a real fight. Before the young man stood a lone wolf, a representative of a species that typically avoided other wolves and led a solitary life. These predators paired only during their estrus cycle, but males almost always abandoned the female once she became pregnant, continuing to live alone. Ko immediately realized that this wolf was the target of his mission. The beast looked wary, but the young man assessed the situation and decided he could begin the fight right then and there, before the wolf launched an attack. He drew his sword and assumed a comfortable stance. The wolf leaped forward, and the young man activated his agility skill to dodge and counterattack as quickly as possible. Taking advantage of his speed, the hero was able to kill the wolf with one precise blow. Seeing the predator's body fall, cut in half by a clean, even swing, Ko was surprised by how sharp his sword was. However, he quickly brought himself back to reality. The important thing now was to collect the loot. Wolf fur could be expensive, and fulfilling the order required proof, the young man reminded himself. He decided there were only 4 wolves left ahead, and if everything went smoothly, the quest would be over quickly. But the next second, he heard a new sound, a quiet but menacing growl from behind him. Turning around, he saw a whole pack of wolves peeking out from behind the trees. The young man was stunned. Logically, these monsters should have acted alone, but now several beasts stood before him at once, and their hostility was undeniable. The next second, the pack broke loose and rushed at Ko, attacking from several sides at once. Ko felt something change in his body. The system reported a level increase to 9th. His health, mana, and physical stats increased, and he gained new utility skills. While the hero was fighting another wolf, the auto-collecting skill was activated, which collected the monster carcasses without his intervention, carefully placing them in the item box. The young man noted that this was incredibly convenient, especially when the fight entered a protracted stage. Realizing that fighting with a sword was becoming tiring, he switched weapons and drew his axe. The heavy blade allowed him to deliver powerful blows and deal with several opponents at once. Just when he thought the battle was over, a new group of wolves appeared. The pack showed no sign of retreat and rolled toward the young man like an endless wave. He couldn't understand why the wolves were so persistent in their attacks. It seemed as if he had become a special target for them, and this was incomprehensible. He began to wonder how many more predators were lurking in the depths of the forest. Every time he dealt with one wolf, another would rush out to take its place, and then another, an endless stream of enemies. Finally, the young man realized that he had found himself in an anomalous situation. For some reason, lone wolves were attacking in a group, which fundamentally contradicted the information in the brochures. Opening the item box and seeing the number of bodies collected, Ko was once again convinced that what was happening was abnormal. He decided that upon returning to the city, he would definitely report everything to the guild. He had just taken a step towards the city when he suddenly heard the growl again, much louder and closer than before, causing him to stop instantly. A large she-wolf emerged from the bushes, another female, and her gaze made it clear that she had no intention of retreating. Ko recalled that males often abandon females and their offspring, leaving them to fend for themselves. And he understood that they couldn't be held responsible for the current chaos. But retreat was impossible, otherwise, he himself would become prey. So the young man prepared for another duel, realizing he had no choice. After another victory, the system announced he'd reached level 16, his stats had increased and his skills had become stronger. It was a reward for a busy day. The young man noticed that as his level increased, his talents truly became more refined. And now he understood, to survive in this world, he needed to continue growing and strengthening his skills. After a long battle, he found himself at a lake, or he decided to catch his breath a little, as the fighting was becoming increasingly difficult. By the water he saw two adventurers, a boy and a girl, sitting on the ground and barely breathing after the horror they had experienced. Ko came closer. He was glad to have met other people and decided to ask if anything serious had happened to them. The adventurers recognized him by his armor and were shocked to see a bear slayer. The girl tried to explain that they were in a hurry to get away from the mountain and looked terrified. The boy trembled as he explained that they had encountered a monster resembling a giant spider, moving far too fast for its size. Ko immediately realized it was a black spider, one of the most dangerous monsters. The black spider was considered a high-ranking threat, usually found deep in the mountains. But the girl said that today it had appeared at the foot of the mountain, which was a departure from the usual monster behavior. The adventurers explained that they were on a routine assembly quest that should not have carried any major risks. However, they were terribly unlucky. They encountered a black spider, which the newcomers could not defeat. The boy told them they'd accidentally encountered an A-rank adventurer, a half-dragon. And the boys remembered her name, Iris. Hearing Iris's name, Ko felt a strong thrill. The adventurers believed the black spider was a monster above rank A, far more dangerous than the armored bear, and that Iris could now be in mortal danger. The young man tried to hide his alarm, but inside he felt a sharp unease. He knew dragons were stronger than humans, but he was only worried about one thing, whether she was alive. He asked the boys if they remembered the place where they'd seen the spider and how to get there. The adventurers pointed him in the direction and then asked if he really intended to go there. Ko firmly declared that he had to find Iris. He also believed the boys should immediately return to the guild and report the threat. They tried to dissuade him, believing that going there alone was madness. The girl understood the seriousness of what was happening and said that they would go ask the guild for help, and that Ko should take care of Iris. The boy hesitated, unwilling to leave Ko alone, but the girl said she had heard the spirits' voices and felt they needed to trust the boy. She asked him to let her go and return to the city with her partner. Ko pondered the girl's words about spirits. He knew of them only from anime and games, but had no idea what they actually were in this world. So he decided to ask the adventurers what they meant. They explained that spirits were invisible beings that controlled natural phenomena, and that the girl possessed a rare skill of spiritual guidance. Thanks to this, the spirits sometimes contacted her and revealed things inaccessible to ordinary people. The young man added that spiritual guidance had helped them many times in the past, and now it allowed him to understand that the young man would have to go it alone. He admitted that he couldn't hold Ko back, but asked them not to overestimate their strength. The adventurers accompanied him to the trail, wishing him luck and caution. They said even the spirits had blessed his journey, and this gave the young man determination. Inwardly addressing Iris, he silently begged her to hold on. Then he took off and ran with all his might, forgetting about pain and fatigue. Activating the properties of the bearskin armor and enhancing his hearing with skills, Ko began to listen to the entire forest around him, hoping to catch even the slightest sound that would lead him to Iris. He hoped he wasn't too late, that the girl was still alive. Her image flashed before his eyes, strong, confident, vibrant, and he fought his anxiety, mentally repeating that he had to make it in time. The young man considered himself a calm person, but now his heart was twitching with anxiety. He suddenly realized that he was worried about Iris far more than he had expected. At that moment, his ears caught a noise coming from nearby. The rustling was heavy, as if something massive were moving among the trees. Coming closer, he saw several trees broken at the very base, as if someone giant had walked through the forest, not caring about the obstacles. The young man thought it was probably the work of the black spider. He quickened his pace, almost breaking into a run. Having run out into the clearing, he stopped abruptly. In the middle of it lay Iris, motionless, surrounded by broken wood. Frightened, Ko rushed to her. The girl lay on the ground, her clothes torn, and blood stained the grass beneath her. But, crouching down next to her, the young man realized she was still breathing weakly, but still, it gave him hope. He tried to figure out where the spider was. It was unclear whether the girl had been the victim of a surprise attack or whether the monster was lurking nearby, preparing to finish her off or attack him. At that moment, the young man heard an alarming sound behind him, a deep, intermittent sound, like a predatory growl. He turned around abruptly. Right in front of him stood a huge spider, black as night, with a shiny shell and many eyes that reflected the light. Ko realized that this was the very black spider the adventurers had spoken of. One glance at its size and structure was enough to understand, this monster truly surpassed the armored bear and posed a deadly threat.